At our wedding, my husband raised his glass and said, "Please thank me." I took in a leftover woman in her 30s. He laughed, "Good luck getting pregnant at that age." My parents chuckled. "We always hoped he'd marry her younger sister." The room burst into laughter. Then a video started playing behind us. And suddenly, the room went silent. From the window of a Boston high-rise, Elizabeth Kennedy gazed at the twilight settling over the city. As vice president of Brunette Capital, her days were surrounded by numbers and data. That day, she had stayed late to complete final checks on a major investment proposal. The office phone rang. It was her mother, Martha. "Elizabeth, you haven't forgotten about tomorrow's dinner, have you?" Martha's voice had its usual sharp tone. "No, Mother, I remember. I'll be there at 7, Elizabeth answered, removing her glasses. "Olivia will be there too. I'm looking forward to hearing about her exhibition." Elizabeth sighed softly. Her sister Olivia worked as a curator at a small local art museum and was her parents' pride and joy. "Yes, of course. You know, Elizabeth, I've invited George Martin's son. He has an MBA from Harvard and is such a lovely young man. And he's single." "Mother, please, I'm busy with work," Elizabeth said, staring out the window. "I want to focus on my career." "But Elizabeth," Martha's voice grew sharper, "a woman should marry while she's young. You're already 38. How long do you plan to wait? Let's talk about this tomorrow." I was just about to head home. Elizabeth ended the conversation. After hanging up, she sank deeply into her chair. Her parents, Martha and George, were former professors at Boston University who prided themselves on valuing traditional values. For them, a daughter's success meant finding a good husband, not building a career. The dinner the next day unfolded exactly as Elizabeth had predicted. In Martha's perfectly arranged dining room, her parents, Olivia, and several coincidentally invited single men had gathered. "Elizabeth brought in $30 million in profits for her company last year," George said proudly, then immediately added, "But no matter how much money you earn, you can't find true happiness without a family, right?" Olivia smiled gracefully. "My exhibition is small, but it fulfills my mission of bringing art to the community. I believe what matters isn't money, but human connections." "That's right, Olivia. You truly understand." Martha squeezed her daughter's hand affectionately. "If only Elizabeth would learn a little from you." Throughout the meal, every time Elizabeth tried to talk about her successes in the financial industry, her mother interrupted her. "Mark, what do you think? What's more important for a woman, a career or family?" Martha asked the young lawyer sitting across the table. Elizabeth quietly set down her wine glass with its lipstick mark. These conversations had been repeated countless times. When she graduated at the top of her class from Harvard Business School, her parents only said, "What a good environment to find a husband." When she was promoted to vice president, they merely worried, "Aren't you focusing too much on work?" "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." Elizabeth left the table and entered the luxurious powder room at the end of the hallway. Standing before the mirror, she took a deep breath. Not once in her life had her parents celebrated the path she had chosen. That night, as she was leaving, Olivia approached her in the parking lot. "Elizabeth, don't be angry, but I'm really worried about you. You'll just keep getting older. My friend Jessica focused solely on her career, and now she's 45 and all alone. I don't want that to happen to you." "Thank you, Olivia, but I'm fine." Elizabeth forced a smile. In truth, it wasn't her sister's concern that hurt her, but the sense of superiority behind her words. 3 months later, at a friend's wedding, Elizabeth met Michael Donovan. He worked as a math teacher at a local high school, and she was drawn to his intellectual charm and warmth. On their first date, Michael eagerly asked about her work and praised her intelligence. "Your work is amazing. I can't imagine handling such complex transactions," Michael said with admiring eyes. "I can barely teach algebra to my students." "You're the one who's amazing. Shaping young minds? That's a far more meaningful job than mine," Elizabeth responded sincerely. Soon after they began dating, Elizabeth introduced Michael to her parents. Their reaction was unexpected. "Finally, you found someone." Martha clapped her hands. "I was starting to give up hope." "Good for you, Elizabeth," George added. "Michael, you're a brave man, dating a 38-year-old woman." Elizabeth was hurt by these words, but Michael laughed them off. As time passed, subtle changes appeared in his attitude. With each of her successes at work, he began saying, "It's embarrassing as a man. Makes me feel like I'm being supported by you," in a joking manner. Elizabeth pretended not to mind. Having no family of her own, Michael had become special to her. 3 months after their engagement, Elizabeth was relaxing at Michael's house one evening. He was walking from the kitchen to the Michael said, laughing, "Right, not many men have the courage to marry a woman in her late 30s, right? But she's amazing. She's the vice president of Brunette Capital." Elizabeth pretended to read her book while overhearing the conversation. When Michael noticed her, he smiled. "Hey, Jim, I'll call you back later." He ended the call and sat on the sofa. How was work? Busy, Elizabeth smiled. I heard your phone call. Michael took her hand. It was just a joke, you know? Jim's a confirmed bachelor, so I was just trying to surprise him. Did you need to mention my age? Don't worry about it. I proposed because I love you. Age doesn't matter. Michael kissed her. It's just that a man has his pride. It takes a bit of courage to marry a successful woman like you. Elizabeth accepted his words despite the pain in her heart. She wanted to believe she was loved. Even if Michael was a little jealous of her success, it was understandable. His annual income was less than a quarter of hers. On the day of their engagement party, George and Martha hosted a dinner at an upscale restaurant. Elizabeth's parents treated Michael like royalty. Elizabeth, Michael, Martha raised her champagne glass. She was a bit too focused on work and running away from marriage. Mother, that's not true, Elizabeth quietly protested. It's fine, Elizabeth, George laughed. We were worried, Martha continued, whether you'd find someone who would love you, especially when thinking about children. A heavy silence fell over the table. Elizabeth felt anxious about having children. She felt a slight gratitude that her parents hadn't used the phrase geriatric pregnancy. We'll be fine, Michael squeezed her hand. Including children. All of it. Elizabeth felt somewhat reassured by his words, but that night, she was further hurt when Olivia raised her glass in a toast. Michael, thank you for choosing my sister. She may not be perfect, but she's worth loving. After the party, on the way home, Michael put his arm around Elizabeth's shoulders. Families are interesting, aren't they? But they just love you. Especially Olivia. Olivia loves me? Elizabeth laughed bitterly. She's always looked down on me. That's not true. She's just worried about you. I talked with her today, and she truly wishes for your happiness. Elizabeth wondered. During the party, she had noticed Michael and Olivia deep in conversation several times. They seemed surprisingly close. As wedding preparations progressed, Michael's behavior gradually changed. While saying I'm just joking, he frequently used phrases like I can't support you on my salary. On dress shopping day, Elizabeth visited a bridal shop accompanied by Olivia and her mother. She chose a simple, elegant dress. That dress? For you. Martha hesitated. What is it? Elizabeth asked. It's a bit plain, Olivia answered. Something more decorative would hide your age better. I don't want to hide my age, Elizabeth took a deep breath. I like this one. But isn't Michael expecting a more traditional dress? Martha said. In the end, Elizabeth stood her ground and chose that dress. However, the day's events created a small crack in her heart. A week before the wedding, a dinner was held at the Kennedy home. Michael chatted happily with Elizabeth's parents and showed special familiarity with Olivia. Michael, what is your ideal family image? Martha asked. Swirling his wine glass, Michael answered, I think I prefer a traditional family. The man works outside, and the woman takes care of the home. Of course, career women like Elizabeth are wonderful too. He laughed, looking at Elizabeth. But in my heart, my ideal isn't a workaholic like Elizabeth, but a more domesticated woman. That's so true, Martha agreed. A woman's true happiness lies in her home. Elizabeth continued eating in silence. She had accepted these insults because they're family. But when she got up to use the bathroom, she paused at a conversation she overheard in the hallway. Doesn't she realize? Olivia's voice was audible. Elizabeth only thinks about work. It was Michael's voice. But that works out well for us. Laughter followed, and Elizabeth's heart raced. She approached quietly and peeked through the crack in the door. She could see Michael and Olivia standing closer than expected. Let's confirm tomorrow, Michael said in a low voice, if everything goes according to plan. Elizabeth cleared her throat and entered the room. The two jumped apart in surprise. I just came back from the bathroom, she said calmly. What plan? Oh, it's a surprise, Michael laughed. Wedding preparations. We want to surprise you. That night, Elizabeth couldn't sleep due to anxiety. She created an excuse to borrow Michael's phone and checked his messages. There was a cryptic text that read, Tomorrow everything changes. The recipient must have been Olivia. Driven by fear, Elizabeth contacted her friend Kate, an IT specialist. Kate, I need your help, she said in a trembling voice. What's wrong, Elizabeth? Are you okay? Tomorrow's wedding. Something strange. Michael and Olivia, and my parents too. Something's not right. Actually, I've been thinking something was off, Kate quietly confessed. There are suspicious points in their behavior. Like how Michael talks about you to his friends. What do you mean? Once, I heard him referring to you as a golden goose. He was joking, but tears fell from Elizabeth's eyes. What should I do? The ceremony is tomorrow. You could cancel. No. Elizabeth steeled her resolve. I'll face this situation with truth. Kate, will you help me? Anything you need, Kate replied immediately. What do you need? Evidence. I need to know what they're planning. And Elizabeth took a deep breath. I also want to prepare for any contingency. The night before the wedding, Elizabeth was alone in her hotel room, staring at Boston's night skyline. A message arrived from Kate Reddy. That was all. On the wedding day, St. Anthony's Church was bathed in Boston's spring sunlight. Elizabeth sat quietly in the preparation room, surrounded by bridesmaids. Her expression was calm, but determination shone in her eyes. Nervous? The makeup artist asked. No, Elizabeth smiled. Rather, I've made up my mind. The door opened, and Kate entered. She approached Elizabeth and said in a soft voice, "Everything is ready. Whenever you give the signal, we can proceed." Elizabeth nodded. "Thank you, Kate." The ceremony proceeded as planned. Elizabeth entered on her father's arm, and Michael waited for her at the altar with a beaming smile. Vows were exchanged, rings were swapped, and they were pronounced husband and wife. After the ministers, "You may kiss the bride," Michael kissed her. On the surface, it was a perfect wedding. The reception venue was set in a luxurious hotel ballroom. Beautiful decorated tables, a champagne tower, elegant music. Everything exuded a romantic atmosphere. Elizabeth smiled and greeted guests while constantly exchanging glances with Kate. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering here," the MC announced. "To celebrate this special day, we'll now hear a speech from the groom, Michael Donovan." As the room fell silent, Michael stepped forward with a glass in hand. His face bore a confident smile. "Everyone, thank you for celebrating our special day," Michael said loudly. "Actually, I want you to thank me." Small laughter spread across the room. "Yes, thank me, for taking this aging leftover woman off the market." A moment of silence covered the venue, followed by uncomfortable murmurs. Michael pretended not to notice and continued. "Everyone, it's a joke. Just a joke," he said, laughing. "But isn't it surprising that an ordinary high school teacher like me could marry such a successful woman?" Elizabeth remained motionless, watching him with a calm expression. "Having children at this age is probably impossible," Michael continued. "But it's okay, I have a plan." The atmosphere in the room froze. Several guests frowned in discomfort, and friends looked worriedly at Elizabeth. Martha and George smiled and raised their glasses. "We always hoped you would marry her sister," Martha suddenly exclaimed. "Olivia would have been more age-appropriate." George nodded. "Well, it's good that Elizabeth found a good companion." We had given up hope. Tension hung in the air, with awkward laughter spreading. Many guests looked confused. Michael continued proudly. "But don't worry, Elizabeth. You were chosen for a special purpose." At that moment, Elizabeth slowly stood up. Quiet anger showed on her face. "A special purpose," she said quietly. "That's right, Michael." Elizabeth gave a small nod to Kate. Suddenly, the screen behind Michael lit up, and a video began to play. People in the room turned around in surprise. The screen showed Michael and Olivia embracing intimately. They exchanged passionate kisses, and Michael gently stroked Olivia's hair. "Once we're married, we'll be free with her money." Michael's voice rang clearly. "The trust fund won't be released unless she gets married, right?" "That's right," Olivia's voice continued. "My sister has money but knows nothing. She's just a convenient tool." "What about children?" Michael's voice asked. "I'll have them." "It's too late for her," Olivia's voice laughed. The video continued, showing evidence that George and Martha knew about the plan. Conversations like Elizabeth's trust fund will be released when she marries, and she won't notice, she's always focused on work. The room was engulfed in frozen silence. Michael, with a pale face, began to say, "This is a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Elizabeth calmly retorted. "Like the content of today's speech?" She took out her smartphone and played the recording of Michael's and her parents' earlier statements to the room. "I may be a leftover," Elizabeth raised her voice, "but at least I know my own worth." She turned back to Michael. "It wasn't me you wanted. It was my money. In collusion with my mother, father, and Olivia." "Elizabeth, that's not it." Michael tried to explain. "My parents," Elizabeth continued, "from the day I was born, you never understood my worth. You always judged me by the values you wanted to impose, never acknowledging my success." Martha stood up and began. "Daughter, this is enough," Elizabeth said coldly. "I don't need a family like this." She slowly removed her wedding ring and placed it on the table. "This marriage ends here. Michael and Olivia, parents." Elizabeth gave a small nod to Kate, and they left the venue with dignified steps. Behind them, voices of confusion and anger echoed. "Wait, Elizabeth," Michael chased after her. That was just Elizabeth turned around. "Just what? A joke? A plan? A conspiracy to ruin my life?" "We were just you and Olivia had a relationship for a long time," Elizabeth said quietly. "And my parents knew. Everyone was trying to use me. About the trust fund. Thanks to you, I understand now," Elizabeth smiled. "My worth is determined by myself. Not by age, marital status, or whether I have children." Thank you for teaching me that, Michael. She turned away and left the hotel with Kate. The twilight streets of Boston seemed to shine beautifully, as if celebrating the beginning of her new life. Everything's ready, Kate said, opening the car door. I'll contact the lawyer right away. Thank you. Elizabeth took a deep breath. For the first time in my life, I feel truly free. The car drove away quietly. Elizabeth, still in her wedding dress, stared out the window. There were no tears in her eyes, only a strong light of determination. 3 weeks later, Elizabeth sat facing a lawyer in a downtown high-rise office. Outside the glass windows, Boston's cityscape spread out. The marriage annulment application is proceeding smoothly, Attorney Jill Sanders said, reviewing documents. The evidence of fraudulent intent is sufficient. The videos and recordings are decisive. Thank you, Jill. Elizabeth nodded quietly. What about the trust fund? The condition set by your father only specified marriage, with no mention of duration. Technically, even for a short period, the condition has been met, Jill smiled. The fund is already under your control. They cannot touch it. Elizabeth exhaled deeply. I want to end this as soon as possible. Of course, Jill became serious. But be prepared for contact from them, especially Michael, who seems to be persistently seeking reconciliation. Elizabeth's smartphone was full of unread messages from Michael, her parents, and Olivia. She had deleted them all without reading. The only reply she had sent was to Michael's message, "We need to talk," with a simple "please contact my lawyer." How is work? Jill asked. Surprisingly understanding, Elizabeth smiled. The CEO himself told me, as long as your personal issues don't affect the company, we support you. Leaving the office, Kate was waiting. She opened her arms as soon as she saw Elizabeth. The two exchanged a long embrace. How did it go? Kate asked. According to plan, Elizabeth answered. Now, let's go to our promised lunch. They headed to a cafe along the Charles River. For the past 3 weeks, Kate had constantly been by Elizabeth's side. After spending a sleepless night at Kate's apartment on the wedding night, Elizabeth had begun moving toward a new life the next day. Any contact from Michael? Kate asked as they sat on the terrace. Almost daily, Elizabeth answered, stirring her coffee. First claiming it was a misunderstanding, then begging for forgiveness. And now saying it's not about the money. I truly love you. What about Olivia? Just one message from her. Elizabeth frowned. I didn't mean to hurt you. Unbelievable. Your parents. Elizabeth paused for a moment, looking at the sea. You've disgraced the family, they said. Their concern isn't about me, but their social reputation. That's terrible. Kate was indignant. But, Kate, Elizabeth looked up. Strangely, I feel lighter. I've always lived concerned about family expectations and society's eyes. But now, I feel the freedom to decide my own life. A few days later, Elizabeth was called to a meeting at Brunette Capital. She nervously entered the CEO's office. Elizabeth, please sit down. Richard Brunette warmly welcomed her. We're not here to discuss your recent situation. We respect your privacy. Elizabeth felt relieved. Actually, I want to discuss the position of manager for our London branch, Richard continued. We believe you are the best candidate for that position. London? Elizabeth was surprised. Yes, a new challenge, a new environment. It would be a wonderful step for your career. Elizabeth's heart beat rapidly. Leaving Boston, physically distancing herself from family and past pain. It was what she had secretly wished for. Let me think about it, she replied. That night, she stood on her apartment balcony, looking up at the starry sky. Her phone rang, and the screen displayed Mother. Elizabeth took a deep breath and answered. Hello, Mother. Elizabeth, please listen. Martha's voice was trembling. Won't you meet with us? Let us explain. Explain? Elizabeth said calmly. What is there to explain about trying to use me? We just wanted your happiness. My happiness? Elizabeth laughed bitterly. Or the trust fund? It's not about money, Martha said, crying. We were wrong. I'm sorry. A long silence followed. Let's have lunch tomorrow, Elizabeth finally said. But this is your last chance. The next day, she faced her parents at an upscale restaurant. Martha and George looked aged. George, in particular, seemed to have aged rapidly since the wedding. Elizabeth. George's voice choked. I don't need excuses, Elizabeth said gently. I just want the truth. We? Martha lowered her eyes. We wanted you to get married. Considering your age, we thought your chances were diminishing. And then Michael appeared, Elizabeth continued. What about his relationship with Olivia? We didn't know at first, Martha admitted. But later, when we realized, it was too late. And you kept quiet. Shamefully, yes. Martha wiped away tears. We were wrong. We tried to measure your worth by money and marriage. We've undervalued your career and success. Elizabeth quietly looked at her parents. Whatever you say, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I will continue to live believing in my own worth. Will you forgive us? George tentatively asked. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Elizabeth answered honestly, but I will move forward. I won't be bound by anger toward you. She was about to stand up but hesitated for a moment. What about Olivia? She's continuing her relationship with Michael, Martha said in a small voice, but they've moved away. In this town, their reputation has been damaged. Elizabeth nodded quietly. You can take care of the bill. The following week, she boarded a plane to London. Sitting by the window, watching Boston recede as they took off, she felt both anticipation and anxiety about opening a new chapter in her life. A new beginning, she whispered softly. The first few months in London were too busy with work and adapting to the new environment. Elizabeth gradually reclaimed herself. She spent weekends touring art galleries and walking along the Thames. She built relationships with new friends and took time to explore her own hobbies and interests. What about starting a course on money management? She suggested one day to her British colleague, Sophia. Especially for young women. That's a wonderful idea, Sophia agreed. Your experience could help many people. Elizabeth began volunteering once a week at a community center, teaching financial literacy classes. There, she shared her experiences and taught young women the importance of financial independence. Don't let others determine your worth, she always concluded, especially when money and emotions mix. A year later, when Kate visited London, they were relaxing at a cafe in Covent Garden. You look happy, Kate smiled. I am. Elizabeth nodded. I've learned the joy of choosing my own life, not by family expectations or social pressure. How's your relationship with your parents? I call them occasionally, Elizabeth answered. I haven't completely forgiven them, but I'm free from hatred. That's what matters. Michael and Olivia? I don't care, Elizabeth shrugged. Their life is their own. I'm walking my own path. As dusk fell, the two stood on a bridge over the Thames. The London skyline, illuminated by the sunset, glowed golden. I will never again let others, especially family, determine my worth, Elizabeth said quietly. That's the most important thing I've learned. Kate embraced her friend's shoulders. You're influencing many people. That courageous action at the wedding has empowered so many women. Elizabeth gazed into the distance. Sometimes she still remembered the pain of that day. But now, that memory didn't weaken her. It strengthened her. Life takes unexpected turns, she smiled. But maybe that's what leads us to our true selves. The conference room on the top floor of a London high-rise was full. The seminar titled Economic Independence for Finding Your Own Worth had attracted women of various ages. When Elizabeth Kennedy took the stage, loud applause erupted. Thank you all for gathering today, Elizabeth smiled. 3 years ago, I had the most painful and most instructive experience of my life. At 41, Elizabeth had achieved success as the president of Brunette Capital's London branch. Under her leadership, the branch had achieved its highest performance ever. At the same time, she had established the Future Women Leadership Foundation, launching a mentoring program for economically disadvantaged young women. Your worth is determined by you. It's not about age, marital status, or having children, it's within yourself. After the lecture, she returned to her office and participated in a conference call from New York. When the meeting ended, her assistant placed an envelope on her desk. It bore a Boston postmark. Elizabeth quietly opened the envelope. Inside was a short letter and a newspaper clipping. Dear Elizabeth, this reminded me of you. I'm trying not to forget what you taught me. Love, Mother. The newspaper clipping had the headline Local Teacher Charged with Fraud with Michael Donovan's photo. According to the article, he had been arrested for trying to defraud money from a student's parents. Olivia's name was also mentioned as an accomplice. Elizabeth threw the clipping in the trash and gazed at the London scenery outside her window. She no longer felt anger toward them. She only felt relief at the path she had taken. That weekend, Elizabeth was participating in a charity event at Richmond Park. While helping with an art workshop for children, she happened to meet James, a British architect who was also volunteering. Their conversation flowed naturally, and they ended up having dinner together. Now, she had found family in the true sense, not by blood, but a circle of friends who truly understood and respected her, people she had chosen herself. She maintained limited contact with her parents, who had acknowledged their mistakes and were gradually trying to change. To James's question, what is family? Elizabeth answered, it's a choice. Not blood ties, but a gathering of people who respect and support each other. And above all, people who acknowledge that your worth is determined by yourself. Watching the sunset sink into the Thames, Elizabeth smiled quietly. Life hadn't turned out as she had envisioned, but as a result, it had led her to a better place. Happy? James asked. Yes, Elizabeth answered from her heart. Because I've become myself, in the truest sense.